Hey, good morning once again. Thank you for joining us, Canvas Church Online. It is week 2 of our reconciliation conversations. Now, we shot this on site at Fountain of Life Gospel Church in Minneapolis. Now, Fountain of Life is a church that's a few blocks from where George Floyd was killed just a few weeks ago in Minneapolis. We had an opportunity, about 40 of us, to go down there and serve, and we had just an incredible experience. And so we thought, you know what, rather than just doing a one-off weekend, what if we actually started a conversation and really asked ourselves, what part can we play in the reconciliation of race? And so this was an exciting experience for us, and sometimes by exciting, I mean it was tough. It was a difficult moment. It was a difficult few moments. There were some things that were covered that made me look inside and ask myself some questions about my perspectives of race and my perspectives of the world. And so I'm so glad that you joined us this morning once again. I really pray that this encourages you, and I really pray that this even helps you start a conversation in your own home and really in your own heart about where you're at on this topic. And so I encourage you, join us, enjoy this morning. Have a great morning. Thanks for joining us.
So my question to you is, what was like your trail of like getting to like here, where you creating a conversation and you take an initiative? So like, what was just, did that make any sense? Like, what was the process for you as a white
Why are we
dude?
sitting right here?
Yeah.
Why are we here right now? Why are we having this conversation? It's a great question. I think for me, probably as a pastor, 5 years ago in Northfield, there was a kind of an upheaval on one of the campuses, and there was rioting and protests, and they shut the campus down, and it was about someone writing a derogatory term on the wall about African Americans. And that was what precipitated all of it. And literally, like, the city of Northfield kind of shut down. And in that time frame, I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to say. You know, and part of it was in my mind, like, you know, much like Jim, I grew up on a farm in Wisconsin. Like, I worked on a farm, there wasn't a lot of diversity, you know? And so in my mind, I thought, well, I don't see color. And I thought that was like, that's a positive thing, right? Like, that sounds like that's very admirable, but it's not reality, right? And so in that moment, I was silent. And I just realized this time, like, I can no longer be silent. I can't look at injustice, and I can't look at a man dying like this and just be silent any longer. And that for me was a kind of like God moving and saying, no, now is the time. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, even in Jim's prayer before we opened, like, each and every one of us carries the image of God. Like, there's no distinction between color and the image of God. When you know, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit were together in Genesis, and they said, hey, let's make man in our image. And in their image, he made them. You know, and it wasn't about like, well, he just made this color and then this color. It was like, no, this is the image of God, and we all bear the image of God and are God's image bearers. So if you know, an African American brother is hurting or sister is hurting, well, I need to speak up for those who are being crushed. I need to speak in that moment, and so that's part of what precipitated it for me. Another part of it was it was the right thing to do. Like, in this season, enough is enough. Like, for me, I was like, what if we actually did something, spoke up, and something actually changed? And my reality is not your reality. Right? So I don't understand all of it. I don't understand the full context of what life is like as an African-American boy or young man or teenager or, you know, getting handcuffed. Like, that's not my experience. This March, I was in Utah, and I was with some buddies, and they were out walking late at night one night. We're like out on a ranch in Utah. And a car went by him, almost hit him, and they're like, man, that was crazy. And 15 minutes later, all of a sudden a cop car pulls up. And in this group of friends, there was a Caucasian gentleman, a white friend, and then an African-American, a black friend. And they were just retelling the story of what happened. The police come up and you know, lights are up, and hey, let me see your ID. And my white friend had a fanny pack on. And he's like, here you go, just like grabbed it and handed it out. And he's like, yeah, didn't even think twice. And then he realized his African-American friend had his hands up and he's like, these are my hands. This is my right hand. I'm gonna take my glove off and then I'm gonna put my glove in my right hand pocket and I'm gonna pull out my wallet. And inside my wallet is my ID. And I'm gonna hand that to you. So he told him that before he actually did it. And then he did here's my glove. And it was just almost like, and my buddy's like, what are you doing? And he didn't even realize in that moment the different, when you talk about, Mark, when you talk about white privilege, like you don't even see that, you don't even think that, and here's my buddy, here you go, But if it had been the flip side, and if it had been his, my friend Queese who did that, he would have, his fanny pack and pulled something out. It could have been an entirely different scenario. The story could have ended totally different. And so both of them coming out of that, like my friend Steve was like, man, that was crazy. I didn't realize that. And Queese was like, that's my life. That's my life. So there's these experiences I've had. And then also, I have 5 children. I have 4 sons and a daughter. And for me, I was like, I want to expose them to this. Like I want them to experience this. And so we came down on Saturday morning and we served and we walked around and we stood there and we stood in front of the George Floyd mural and just took it in, read different things and just soaked it in. And then we walked around and we heard the different people, say his name and people chanting George Floyd and then people praying and people crying. And it was my 15-year-old, my 13-year-old, my 8-year-old. And we were sitting there and I just stood there and I said, boys, what if racism ended in your generation? Then the next logical thought in my mind was like, that'll never happen. It'll never happen. That's what my thought was. But then my other thought was like, if we don't say it, we'll never see it. Mm. And then my 8-year-old son, Finn, he said, Dad, what's racism? And part of me was like, wow, that he's so innocent. He doesn't understand. Then the other part was like, wow, he's so ignorant. He doesn't understand. I've never taught him. I've never trained him. He's never been in that experience before. He's never been, I think his life as an 8-year-old, white boy compared to a African-American boy at 8 years old, like their life experience is probably quite different, So I haven't done my job as a father to put him in a context where he can interact and he has a Payton speaking into his life. And he has a Payton where he's high-fiving. So he sees something on the news or he hears a story and all of a sudden he's like, that doesn't jive. That doesn't make sense. Like it doesn't jive with my Payton wouldn't do that. Like he has a context of understanding. It's no longer us and them. Mm-hmm. It's no longer us and them or them and us. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm us, you're them, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's no longer that. It's like, no. It's not us or them. There's no divisive language here. It's like, I know Payton. I know Mark. Like that doesn't make sense. It doesn't, and part of that has to do with, we've even talked about this to a degree. Jim, you said blind guides. Like the Pharisees were blind guides and that they saw their way, they saw their unique context, they saw their privileged perspective, and everyone else had to try to catch up to them or live up to them, right? And so we're even talking in this moment, like, Mark, you mentioned your friend that said, I don't see white privilege. I don't see it. Like, what do you mean? Like, I don't understand it. Like, and I think in this season, if we're going to change something, and I say this at Canvas on a regular basis, but if we're going to fix something, we have to face it first. We have to face the foundational issues. We have to face the systemic issues. We have to face, and part of that is honestly having the conversation. Like I'm sitting here listening and learning. Like I've heard the George Washington and the different components and the forefathers and how wonderful, and I hear it from the perspective of what incredible men, and then on the flip side you're like, yeah, I was 2/3 of a man in their eyes. I was property in their eyes. They could do what they wanted to with me or my wife or my children in their eyes. And that's different from my perspective, but I'm learning like, oh my gosh, I'm beginning to see clear. And I this idea of like, I didn't see, and we talked about open their eyes. You asked, why are we down here? Like, why are we coming down here? Like, why am I down here? Why did Canvas come for a couple days? Why are we here right now? Why are we launching a long-term partnership with how do we continue to have these conversations? How do we continue to be in your neighborhood and in your life and in your heart? And I think part of it is maybe for the first time in my life as a 43-year-old man, I finally see hope and I see something different, and that might be extremely ignorant. But in my mind, I'm like, I've got to do something. I've got to act. We've got to act now rather than just sitting back. And even in coming down a couple weeks ago, I told you guys this, and there are some people like, well, this is very white privilege oriented. And I was like, okay, I don't know how to live in that or like white silence, which we were 5 years ago. And I was like, okay, is this white savior or white silence? And I was like, I would rather err on doing something. We're not saviors. We're here to serve. Can it just be service? Does it have to be savior? I'm not about savior. There's only one savior. I'm not him. I'm here to serve. And even for us, if that's something that's coming, and how can we lend a hand? How can we come alongside? How can we, just like not come down and say, hey, I know everything. Actually, I read a blog about white privilege. Can I talk to you about it? Can we? You're like, okay. That's not it. Like, I'm down here like, Mark, help me see. I mean, you lived 3 blocks from where George Floyd was murdered. You work 1 block. I've served in the community center that you run. It's an incredible system. I saw people checking in, checking out, and building the grill, and people are talking to me, and it was like, wow, it was so great to see like life happening, because you see the news and all you see is like, man, this crazy protest and all these things. And even you in that day, you're like, you were burdened for your city. Like you were like, the people of Minneapolis did not do this to their city. Like you gotta tell people, they did not do this to their city, because you love your city. This is your neighborhood. And it was so good to be there and see that. And I think part of it, I think ignorance is perpetuated when we don't try to find information for ourselves. When I allow like the media or someone else's opinion to inform me, as opposed to, I want to sit and talk to Mark. I want to sit and talk to Payton. Pastor Kelvin, I want to hear from him. I want to hear the generations. I want to hear the wisdom. I want to hear because I have limited knowledge. I have limited perspective. I have limited understanding. And if I can't sit and even, hear Mark say, yeah, white privilege, and be like, whoa, what are you talking about? Like, no. I have to be like, yeah, help me understand that. Like, what is that? Like, if we can't ask questions, like you said, without being offended at an experience, because I shouldn't be offended by your experience. I should be like, wow, tell me more, because in hearing your experience, that will inform my mind. It will open my eyes, so I can actually see like, wow, white privilege, that's a real thing. Like I didn't realize that. So give me more. Like obviously I'd heard that before this and understood that to a degree, but like, wow, it's a totally different context, because our eyes are different. We see it differently, and I think part of it is, how do we get to the point where I'll never fully understand what it's like to be in your shoes, in your setting, even in your skin. I'll never fully understand that, because I'm not. But I can strive to understand. I can strive to be like, okay, I can struggle. Like, I believe the struggle will make us stronger. Like, how do we struggle together rather than struggle with each other, if that makes sense? Like, because I fully believe, like, for my 8-year-old to say that, like, there's a level of innocence that I'm like, yes, but there's also a level of ignorance, that it's the privilege piece, that he's never had to experience what it's like to be racism, or he's not a racist or have racist individuals. He's never, when I get pulled over, which happens on occasion because I'm speeding, I'm not often concerned about not going home that night. I'm not often concerned that, a gun is coming in my face when I'm like this and trying to explain, here's my license, I'm gonna give it to you here. Like, I don't understand that framework, but that's an ongoing reality. Am I correct? Like, that's an ongoing reality.
Yes. My son now lives in Virginia. He graduated from Old Dominion, and I had to have the conversation. If you do get stopped, this is what you have to say, this is what you have to do. Please don't make any quick movements. And, you know, I'm sitting here right now and just certain things are going through the mind. That's hurtful and hard to get over the fact that you got to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, just to have that conversation is lowering. I feel that it's just lowering a person as a human being.
Yeah.
You know, to have to worry about those things, and that's, you know, I kind of go back to what I was saying earlier. You know, like you said, everybody's been stopped before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, everybody might have some type of interaction, but if you go into that interaction already scared that someone's gonna hurt you, that's supposed to protect you, it's even hard to explain, because right now I'm starting to feel a little goofy.
Yeah.
But it's just hard to explain that, and even the fact that you have to explain it a little bit, it's kind of demeaning.
Yeah.
And but we've all had to have those conversations. You know, of like, you know, Payton's experience of walking home that night. Mm-hmm. If someone wouldn't have had that conversation with you, to keep looking out for yourself, to watch your back as you're the only African American trying to get home in the evening. Mm-hmm. The fact that in your mind, when you seen that police car come, you already knew in your mind that they were going to circle back on you. They circled back on you. So it's hard. Those are things that if you're not a black person, you don't even take those in consideration.
Yeah.
You would never have to have that conversation with your 8 or 15-year-old about how to even stand when they talk to you. You can't show any type of aggressiveness.
Yeah.
So I don't know that. Yeah, that's when you kind of talk about privilege or just the differences that people don't really think about. Those are everyday things that tear at a person.
Yeah.
Whether we realize that it's tearing at us, it does. You better fit in this system or you're gonna perish.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing a lot of now, with more of the revolutionary mindset of what's happening today, there's young people that are not, they're not buying that. I've been told, Mark, you guys turned the other cheek. What happened? You got slapped on the other one. Y'all marched, the dogs attacked you, whatever. You just kept on marching. You sung "We Shall Overcome" over and over and over and over, and here we are in the same situation and probably even worse. Yeah. What did we expect people to do this time around? Yeah. People were mad. They don't even know why they're mad. This systematic racism is about as confusing not only to you, but to us also. Wow. Because we've been part of this for so long, we have accepted.
Yeah, normalized.
It's an everyday thing that if I'm driving and a police car comes behind me, I'm doing an extra look in my mirror. Mm-hmm. That's part of our lives where we've been so part of this system that we now expect to be treated differently. Mm-hmm. That's hard. That's hard to deal with. It's hard to explain, and it gets heavy on the heart. Yeah. And right now, my heart is heavy. I don't know any other way to explain, because it's confusing to me. Mm-hmm. Why do I go for this? Why am I being treated this way? why am I being treated differently than other African Americans because I have a standing in the community? It's just like, it's hard. It's hard to deal with. It's hard to explain. And, you know, this format, these type of formats, I hope is really being helpful in having people think there is no easy answer. If there was an easy answer, we wouldn't be dealing with this 400 years or so later.
Yeah.
But I go back to America was built from the ground up on these racist thoughts, on the unfairness of what is, you know, of what we've seen over and over. So, I mean, right now the conversations are great, but if people really want to attempt to start breaking some of this cycle, like you already said, it got to start in the heart. What I've noticed with everything's going on, I'm getting so many people that want to donate. Supplies are coming in, and those are great.
Yeah.
But if your heart
It's in the same spot, yeah.
is in the same spot,
Yeah.
if you're not willing to at least open up your eyes and see what privilege is, you're gonna get caught back into the same cycle.
Yep.
Yeah.
That when this finally starts going away or the media starts moving away, your heart is not going to change.
Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Because that's that white savior complex we talk about.
Yeah.
You know, where you come weeks after what transpired, and then you try that, well, you add Jesus, and then without no type of cultural or no type of information being given, you know what I mean? When you just enter somebody's house, you know what I mean? You're not just telling them, well, you need to change this, you need to change this, you need to fix the roof.
Right.
Like, no.
Yeah.
You want to learn more about the house. You want to know, okay, was this your house or did you buy this house for somebody else? What I'm saying is, it's a exchange of stories.
Yeah. Tell me your story.
Tell me your story.
Yeah.
So then, one, you have to put yourself in the position to listen.
Yeah.
Not listen to respond. We often do that.
Oh.
But listen to learn.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more about yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like to be a white man.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like. I have white friends who are struggling right now, and because they like, all this is wrong, I'm seeing all this. And I had one friend, she been coming to our church all the time and just helping serving, and it's just been super cool.
Yeah.
But then she go back home to explain to her parents, it's like they seeing things from the news perspective, and she's actually in it. She been to the protests and stuff,
Right.
and it's like, no, that's not what it is.
Yeah.
So it's like all it is navigation. You know, now I have white friends who is navigating, and it's like I can't help you with that because my navigation looks different than yours.
Yeah.
But we can continue talking about it. We have to put ourselves in a position to learn,
Yeah.
to hear.
Yeah.
You know, not to respond
Yeah.
with stats, not to respond
Yeah.
with situations or other scenarios. Well, this happened to this too. And it's like, yeah, the whole, America as a whole is broken.
Yeah.
It's broken. Racism affects all of us, not just black people. It affects all of us. So we have to, the common thing of this whole conversation starts with the heart.
Yeah.
You know, what are some things that you've been believing? Someone's been believing in some foolish stuff. And we've been saying some foolish stuff without actually listening to ourselves. You know, you have to what I tell people all the time, you have to deconstruct your identity. You know, because once again, it's a sin issue. But to be able to, one, appreciate somebody else, do you appreciate yourself?
Yeah.
To be able to love somebody correctly, you gotta love yourself. And if you have insecurities built up, if you compare yourself to other people all the time, then it's hard for you to see. It's hard for you to see, and it's hard for you to grow. That's just a human basics. Like, you have to deconstruct yourself because, like I said, in America, it's so broken, and it's a systematic of what we taught of how to see people. We taught what we believe in ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, it's like dang, we had to, like, I had to deconstruct myself. I had to learn my history is past slavery.
Yeah.
You know, that wasn't taught my 18, 22 years. Like, I'm in college now, and we still don't really talk about this stuff. I have to do research on my own.
Sure.
Outside of my university to figure out my history, you know?
Yeah.
So it starts with deconstructing yourself. What are some things that you've been believing?
Yeah.
You know, what are some perspectives you've been holding? You know, what are some things you've been comparing yourself to?
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's just a great way to start understanding other people's perspectives and narratives when you start understanding your own.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Cause a change has to happen, but like the only way we can combat this together is when we do our own deconstruction, you know? Yeah.
I think it's so powerful what you said. So much of that was so powerful. Thank you. But I think of the piece where, like, listening. You know, I'm not listening to rebut what you're saying. Mm-hmm. I'm not listening to say, well, Mark, what about this? What about this and this and this? Because that doesn't help at all. That just continues the divisive dialogue, as opposed to me just sitting here and just listening and just taking it in. I love what you said too about, well, tell me your story. Tell me your story, because your story is unique to you. My story is unique to me. You know, Jim, your story is unique to you. Mark, your story is unique to you. Like, I can learn from your story. I can glean knowledge from your story. You know, if I try to critique your story, like, well, why did your dad do, or why did you do this, or why didn't you do this, or why did you, like, I don't know. It's my story, you know, and I'm not listening to critique your story. I'm listening to learn. You know, and Jesus also talked about, when he was talking to the Pharisees, he said so often, you know, they're so fixated on the speck in your eye when I got literally a plank, like a 2x4 in my own eye.
Yeah.
Like, literally, I'm busy critiquing the small things that, well, you're doing this wrong, Mark. And you're like, what? Like, what are you even, and I'm simultaneously ignoring and stewarding my heart. And saying, well, what is it in my heart? What do I need to literally, you know, what David prayed, search my heart and know me. Like, you know my heart, God. Search it. Show me the way. Show me the things. Show me the teaching. Show me the things that inform my heart and frame my life. Because Solomon talked about how to, you know, guard your heart, because everything flows out of your heart. Everything you do. And I think something you said, Payton, that was so good is that, you know, the way we treat other people honestly should be a mirror, like the way we love other people should be a mirror that we regulate our own self-love by. Because if I'm treating you like you're less than human and less than God's image, well, that means that I think of myself that way, or I see myself that way, because I'm truly not loving God and loving people. Mm. You know, so that's an indictment on me. That's not an indictment on you. That's an indictment on my heart. Not your skin color, not your situation, not your story. That's Jeff Wendt. That's where I have gone wrong. Does that make sense? And so, I mean, and jump in here. Like, this is, like I said, I'm here to learn, and oftentimes I talk too much to learn. And so I love, I love hearing it.
You know, Mark, his son and my son played baseball together. And, you know, just through some of this, I kind of, in basketball, I don't know, they might have played basketball together too, but you know, he was talking about the conversations he had to have with his son. I never had.
Yeah.
You know, and these are learning times, but never did I think maybe once my son started driving, he'd maybe get pulled over or something. Thought crossed my mind, but never thought of having that conversation, you know, with him. And, you know, I don't know, I think perception is big. That's why we've started something here whenever groups are coming in to volunteer. Now we're going to do something called cultural perspective, and I've used this team to help bring their perspective, that the world doesn't get a proper perspective, mm-hmm. and so that we can grow together, find out where we're at. And because I think that it's, I don't know, we're like in America, I feel like the African American community it's kind of like playing a Monopoly game. And even if you could even say they weren't even really allowed to play, but let's say they were, but you can't own property. And when you go around to buy land, you know, or no, go past where you're supposed to get payday, you give that to another person, give it to the white person. I mean, that's how they were playing life for 150 years, really.
Yeah.
And more even now, because there were still things in place that, whether the GI Bill they come out of, serving in the country, and that could have been one of the greatest detriments to the African American community because really to help get ahead and get stability, ownership is key, because poverty creates a lot of the issues that we see and that we have, and the police are a lot of times coming into these areas because of that. And so these are things, it's almost like I said, it's almost like playing a Monopoly game, but they weren't able to do any of that stuff. And now we're just finally, whenever I talk to especially younger African Americans, I keep saying, you gotta be owners, you gotta be owners. First, we gotta be owners of our soul, and committing our life to Christ, because God ain't broke, and He has got our best interest at heart. And so all together, regardless of who you are, whatever nationality you come from, or whatever color of your skin, God created you, and that's where it has to really start ultimately. But when we look at things in America, that, as we were talking about injustices, those are things that, so the GI Bill, some of the other redlining and just creating, the school, the educational system and segregation in that, and the things that were staples in a person's ability to build families and whatnot, and so we need to be able to come together on that and try to help correct, some of those things that were wrong. I mean, there's so many things that I think people don't even, realize. They didn't know there was redlining. They didn't even know there was, the educational system, and how kids of people of color, especially African Americans, weren't given the same opportunities, and that's why they came up with the HBCUs, the historically black community colleges and universities, so that they could educate themselves. And actually, they tried to a long time ago, and that was whether it's Black Wall Street or with the colleges. I mean, they're just trying to get. They were shortcutted in pretty much every way, and for us to be able to come alongside that, because I think like white America loves to judge black people based on, well, why ain't you this? Well, why ain't you that? And just like, bro, we were trying to play Monopoly, but you wouldn't let us play by the rules you're playing by, and here we are. We're just trying to get ahead, and or we're just trying to at least get even, not even ahead, but get ahead from where they've been in the past. So, and there's just a lot of that I think people don't understand when they watch the news from outside the metro area. They're looking at it as they're still the problem, and there's just the narrative isn't God-centered, I don't think. I mean, it's just in getting the wrong picture. And so I mean, I think that if you said, hey, you want to play Monopoly, but but I'm playing like this, and you're gonna have to play like that, man, I ain't playing no Monopoly with you.
It's not fair.
So we want to be able to come alongside and try to help look at those things that really were the injustices that white people, or not even white people, but people in general, I think even anybody really doesn't even see that. So God said, there's a lot of injustices. I'm about to bring my wrath because you ain't paying attention to the injustices that you're allowing to happen. And how do we change that? I think that's always the big thing. It's attacking the systems that were, like Mark said, that were in place since the founding of the country. I believe that the generations are moving in a direction to grow out some of that. But I mean, I think what we're doing here is another aspect of it that can be helpful. Go ahead.
So my question to you, if you mind sharing, like, what was your process? A pastor, who grew up in Wisconsin, in a farm, and coming to Minneapolis, going to North Central. So like, what was your process of just learning different narratives?
Yeah, I think when I first came here, I came to this church, and this church actually was founded by African Americans. Actually, there was African American families present. There was of that family, the family was a lot of it had to do with this church, me being at this church, and the Lees, their great uncle served in World War I, tried to come home and buy a house, and he bought a house on the other side of 46th Street. This is on 40th Street. He bought a house on the other side of 46. Black people weren't supposed to buy houses there. And this was all part of the planning to keep black people in certain areas where they could maintain them condensed in poverty. And then eventually, as that kind of changed a little bit, then all the businesses moved out, and a lot of black people couldn't own certain things, couldn't get transportation to even get the decent jobs. So anyway, so this Arthur Lee tries to buy a home, or did, south of 46th Street, and this was in the 30s. And there's newspaper clippings. You can Google it. That house now is a part of the Historical Society. But there's newspaper clippings of over 2,000 to 3,000 white people demanding that he get out of their neighborhood. And this is our heritage. This is a great uncle of one of the founding families to our church. His name was Arthur Lee. His descendants were slaves.
Wow. Wow.
Guess where that name came from?
Robert E.
Yep.
Wow.
And he had a baby with one of his slave ladies.
Wow.
And so when so this church here, even when it founded, that the African American families were part of it, and I think some white people said, I ain't gonna be part of that. And the pastor at the time, it basically just said, this is what heaven's gonna look like, however he worded it.
No, 100%.
And so I came into this church with that kind of the history. And already when you talked about founding, what is it founded on? A lot of people say that about churches. Find out what that church was founded on.
Yeah.
And that'll say a lot about
Their theology.
there's a lot of things, yeah. And even the spiritual strongholds that are within that church.
Correct.
So our country, the spiritual strongholds that are in our country is white supremacy. And those are the demonic roots.
Yeah.
White supremacy is an indictment against God.
Yeah.
It's almost like what Satan did in heaven, said, I'm going to show you I'm better than you. And it's almost like white America just saying at the time, or saying, we're better. And wait a minute, he placed equal value on all of us.
Right. Right.
So then I come here, and I'm just someone that really wasn't interacting with people of color, and but I just love God, and I just love people. I was interacting with people. I was talking to, like I said, my youth group. We were, like I said, over 50% African American, and it just happened because if I see a kid, I talk to him, and not even thinking about it. And you guys probably see me sometimes where you just kind of like, does he think he's like them or something? Is he just talking? And I forget. I'm just like being a person, Maybe thankfully my parents didn't really have those. It wasn't part of our. Well, I guess I was on a farm. I was working too much. I didn't have time to think about it really. But there's a lot of stuff, and there's probably vernacular that was used that I really didn't think about till maybe after the fact. Maybe things that like that. But anyway, so what changed it for me? So here I'm just working with these young kids that are we're all getting together. We got so about 50% African American, Native American, Asian, white, but we're all getting together. We're doing Bible study. We're playing football together, playing basketball together. We're just doing life. But the thing about was interesting about this, and I look back and it was funny, but it wasn't. They would joke about the stereotypes. They would joke about, man, something about the police, man, yeah, and they'd be joking about how the police did them wrong. But it was all. They were kind of joking, but it kind of wasn't a joke.
Hurtful,
yeah.
So I have a question. I have a couple questions to help even, perpetuate the conversation, if that makes sense, the reconciliation conversation. So I think one of the things that's been interesting, I feel like we all maybe touched on it to a degree, but just where our information comes from, what our perspective is built on. I think so often we look at the media or what we learned in, maybe a broken educational system that perpetuates part of the problem, right? And so if someone were in this time or season to come up and just say, Mark, help me understand, or Payton, help me understand. help us understand the unique position that puts you in. Because a friend of mine, when all of this happened, I sent him a text and I said, I want you to know I love you, I care for you, I'm here for you. I said, you need someone to talk to, someone to yell at, someone to hit, someone to cry with, someone to, whatever you need, I'm here for you. Because I just wanted him to know I was there to support him, but I didn't want to call him and say, hey, give me your perspective. Because it's just like, that's just not, no. I want you to know I love you first and foremost. And so if someone were to come up and ask you this, like, what is this? What position does this
Can
put
I
you
go
in?
first, Payton?
Go ahead.
First thing that I would ask still, how much time you got?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yes.
That's the first. That's the first thing.
Absolutely.
That I would ask them. How much time you got?
Yeah.
Because if you really want to kind of know, we probably might need to be friends first.
100%.
Because just if someone came, if this was, we hadn't met before and you would just kind of make conversation with me and you asked me that question, I wouldn't be able to answer it.
Yeah.
Not just right out of the blue, because to be able to answer that, you got to kind of know me so that you don't take certain things you might hear from the media, or if you was riding down Lake Street and you seen some person of color just doing some of the most outrageous things like I was doing today, riding down Lake Street, like, what are you doing?
Right.
You just wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So, my friends. I'm probably I got about the most diverse friends ever.
Yeah.
But the reason that we're still friends, the guys that I grew up with, as kids, the majority of us are still friends today.
That's awesome.
We used to call ourselves the Rainbow Coalition because we had there was everybody that was part of our group. The reason 30 years later that this group is still loosely together, because we know each other. We know each other. Part of the guys in this group are questionable. Are very questionable where they're at as far as race.
Sure.
But we're able to still get along because we truly know each other. And that's hard for somebody to truly know somebody when it's hard to come in contact with people.
Right.
But for our group, we fight, we're old men now. And some of the things that we still say if someone from outside, they would not understand our relationship.
Sure.
But the reason that we have been able to last and coexist for so long, we took time to know each other from kids.
Yeah.
South Minneapolis neighborhood, in the Phillips neighborhood. I grew up on the block of 28th Street and 14th Avenue. We were the only black family within a 2 to 3, 4 block radius. So I had to make friends with the other people in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Technically, we're still friends 35 years later, but it was a rocky road. One of my best friends, Ivan Feisthamel, 100% pure German.
Oh, sure.
I was the first black person that ever walked into his house.
Wow.
I remember his mother, she didn't know that I heard the conversation. She grabbed him back in the kitchen and said, if your dad was still alive,
Wow.
and you brought him into this house, do you know? And I'm like in the front.
How old are you at this point?
Oh, this is right when we first moved, when my family first moved here from Los Angeles, Watts and South Central. So I'm coming from Watts and South Central to Minnesota in the late mid-70s.
Yeah.
Coming from a school where the only white people that I've really seen was either the teachers or the security people. Coming to Minnesota, and I'm the only black kid in the class.
Wow. Exact opposite.
So a complete culture shock on that. But I guess where I was going to ask it, simple questions might sound simple, but the answers will never be as simple because it really has to do, it's nothing what will come out of my mouth or my experiences of a black man. It kind of, if you knew me, you kind of knew, there's certain things you wouldn't ask me.
Sure.
Because you already know me. You wouldn't have put me in the same category as that person that I was just talking about when I'm riding down Lake Street that I just couldn't stop watching that was doing something. You would never put me in that category.
Right.
But if you don't know me, why wouldn't you throw me in that category of that person that was just doing something outrageous?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's easier to do that when you don't know a person.
Yeah.
Growing up, there's different stereotypes on both sides. Don't do that because that's what white people do.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, man, I sure would like to do that. But these are the things that are ingrained not only in white people's head, but in our heads, where when we try to move out of that box, those fears come back.
Yeah.
Those things that my mom, the experience that happened to her and her parents, those same fears that was taught to me is now in my head.
Yeah.
So when you start looking at the bigger picture, there's no one-word answer, there's no 50-word answer. It's kind of, you have to open up your heart, back to the heart again. Have to go back to opening up your heart and your mind and really try to understand something. And if it's not there in front of you, you might have to reach out for the information. So.
I think that's so good. I think even the level of intentionality, like you have to be intentional about it. You have to reach out. You have to, like even making space in your heart.
Yes.
I often talk about, like in Minnesota, we are so very connected in so many ways to even, you just mentioned you're very connected with your childhood friends. I think it's unique and common in Minnesota. So oftentimes when it comes to new relationships or creating space, people are like, well, all my Legos are filled. I'm all filled up on friends. I have no space. And then you face a situation like this and you're like, okay, so the only way anything is gonna change is if we intentionally go after it, if we intentionally, attempt to change it. And so then we have to create space in our hearts and our lives. And it's not, hey, Mark, tell me what this is like. It's like, well, A, how much time do you have? And B, why don't you just come observe? Why don't you just come watch? Jesus said this, come and see. Or Andrew said this about Jesus, hey, come and see, just come and see. Someone said, can anything good come from Nazareth? When they're talking about Jesus, Andrew said, well, just come and see. Like, just come and see what's happening. Come and see what it's like. Come and see what it's like to live in my neighborhood or to serve in my neighborhood or to know individuals. And I think that's so important information-wise because it's, Mark's not like that person on Lake Street doing the crazy thing. It's like, I know Mark. I know his heart, I know his character, I know who he is. So it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up with what the news is saying or someone is informing of or a blog that I read or something that someone said or something my grandpa said 30 years ago. Like, that doesn't make sense. So the question being, Payton, to you, if someone were to come up and say, hey, Payton, help me understand what's happening, your perspective, my perspective, white privilege, what's going on in your heart and your life in this season, help me understand, like start a conversation. Where does that sit with you? How does that make you feel?
I'll respond with this, because even now I still get those questions.
Sure.
I go to University of Northwestern St. Paul. It's predominantly white.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many white people DM me, text me, man, I just want to know everything. And I'm like, what is everything?
What don't you?
It's like,
Where do you want
it's like, I'm not no book, no dictionary, like. And so like, you ain't finna just read me up and then, I got it. Like, no, cause it's here's one. There's so many different ways of being black. There is not one way of being black.
Wow.
Yes.
His version of black is different than my version of black.
Yes.
because we had different experiences. Is there some things that we experience that is similar? Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I have a housemate who was adopted by a white family.
Yeah.
That's a different version of black.
Yeah.
So there's different versions of black. There's not one person not represent all black people. Just like he gave that example when he was driving and somebody was just acting crazy. That's their version.
That's a different version.
That's a different version. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just want to get that out there. You know, just because you have that one
So-
black friend, that doesn't mean he represents the whole black community.
Well, it's so good that you said that, because I would never, like, from my standpoint, I would never assume that like all white people are the same. You know, like you have someone from the South, it's a different perspective than someone from, you know, New York or someone from LA. But then, you know, like, oh, well, you know, African American or black, yeah. Like, what is your perspective? Like, as if you speak for every single individual. And as we've talked about so many times, like, your stories are unique.
Yep.
Your stories are different. You know, so therefore your perspective is different. So once again, that it just makes so much sense to know you. Like, how do I, like, you want to understand this, come and know me. Come and see me. Come and observe me. Come and be my friend. And I think sometimes, like, oftentimes in when we seek information, it's very formulaic. Like, hey, help me understand. Like, X plus Y always equals Z, and you're like, it doesn't work.
It's the stats thing we was talking about, and that's where I tell people you can't add statistics to somebody's experience.
Yeah.
What somebody experienced, there's no stats for that.
Yeah.
You know, there's no stats of people locking their doors or walking across the street as I'm walking in their same direction. There's no stats to that. You know, that's just experience, and you have to believe me.
That's your story, not a statistic.
Right, and to answer your question, when people ask me that, I ask them why. Why do you want to know? You know, I think of Jesus. Jesus was a great person who did that. And I think of like the two blind men that was following him, and Jesus was like, why do you follow me? So by asking why, now the two blind men was able to tell him their story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's that exchange. So when white people ask me, well, tell me about this, I'm like, why? What's some things you've been hearing?
Yeah.
You know? So then they send me huge paragraphs where they go on for a whole hour about like, man, I'm just confused about this and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like 4 or 5 questions and stuff. But like, that's the narrative, because in spaces like this, we are so used for us to speak and y'all to be quiet. You know what I mean? We're used where black people speak up about racism and stuff like that, but white people don't say a word. No, we don't know what y'all thinking. Please speak. Tell us your experience.
And if I could just jump real quickly. I was in another conversation with people, and I was saying what makes this a little bit different, to kind of bring the George Floyd stuff back together. What makes this a little bit different is there's been other tragedies in the African American community. White America is used to seeing us grieve. White America is used to seeing us cry. Black mothers on TV, oh my baby, oh my baby. They're used to that, and it's kind of insensitized to it.
Almost numb to it.
But when different faces was out there part of that protest, and I don't even want to say protest, different faces that was at that memorial, respecting George Floyd, and just not just George Floyd, hopefully it was the whole what has been happening. You know, that's what started changing this narrative. If it was just us, I hate to say it, white America since slavery days have been insensitized to our pain. So having this conversation, the fact when I got teary-eyed on you, that day I got teary-eyed just a couple of minutes ago, but when I first met you and I was just trying to explain to you, you know, just kind of what was going on, and just the fact that I was just seeing the diversity, seeing so many people that didn't look like me, that was up there caring about what happened, that helped me. We're used to crying. We're used to being in the street, being victimized. The difference is now the rest of the world has had an opportunity to say, what the heck?
Yeah.
This is wrong.
Yeah.
If it was just us doing the what the heck, we've seen it before.
It's normalized. Yeah.
It's happened before. So, I know we only have a few more minutes, but I just wanted to get that out there. What makes this a little bit different, other people other than us is now crying as part of this pain.
Yeah.
That's looking up in the sky, oh Lord, what is going on?
Yeah.
Because
We've done this for centuries.
Because you bring up, we're using class and there's a question, you don't want to reveal your ignorance, so you stay silent.
Correct.
In these spaces and these conversations, we need white people to speak up.
Yeah.
So then we can clear your ignorance with the correct information. Yeah. Because through social media, through the system, whether that's education, whether that's through our jobs, like I said, through our churches, we was fed on lies. Yeah. We was taught, all of us was taught lies about different people group. Yeah. And we don't speak up, but also listen. Yeah. Right? Cause like I'll say, actually I don't know. I'll say through my experience, back in like 2000 with the whole Trayvon Martin situation, how that transpired, white people started listening. Okay, great. Yeah. But then it became this pattern where, okay, in this space I'm not gonna say nothing because I'm not trying to reveal my ignorance. And it's like, what do you think? Yeah. What are you processing? What questions do you have? This is a conversation not a one-way, we speak at you and you just take notes. No, you tell us what you think, because it's also gonna help us too how to respond. You know what I mean? So good. So
it's a dialogue.
Yeah, it's a dialogue, and that's what I tell my fellow white brothers and sisters. Like, why do you want to know? Why do you want to tell me what you think before I explain you my experience? Tell me what you've been hearing. Yeah. And let's talk about that. Yeah. Tell me what you grew up with. What perspective you've been holding on to. Yeah. And why are you letting it go now? So, it's that exchange of narrative.
Well, hey, I'm so grateful. Mark, thank you. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for your time. Seriously, Pastor Jim, thank you for putting this together. Thanks. Payton, thank you for being you.
Thank you.
Thanks for those biceps. That's good. Well, hey, Canvas, I'm so glad that you were a part of this journey with us, and I really believe that this is the beginning of a conversation. This isn't the end. This isn't the final piece. I feel like this is like the preface or the foreword. We have chapter 1 coming, chapter 2, chapter 3, and I believe that my hope is like what I shared with my 8-year-old son. I would love if through our efforts we were able to turn the tide. I pray that, I ask that, I have hope for that. That's my prayer in this season. That's one of the reasons why we're here. This isn't a one-off. This isn't a white savior complex. We're here to serve, we're here to stay. We want to be a part of this process long term. And we need you. We need you to be part of the conversation. We need you to be a part of the process. This isn't a time for us to sit back or remain silent. This is a time for us to step up, step in, and really step into who God has called us and created us to be as human beings, and in honor the image of others. And I want to encourage you with that. I want to challenge you with that and say this is the beginning of the conversation. And I want you as your pastor, I want you to join us. I want you to be a part of this. I want you to, even though it might hurt sometimes, we need to understand where we've missed it. We need to understand our ignorance. And oftentimes that puts us in a vulnerable position. And that's okay, because I really don't think that we're going to move forward as individuals and as a country if we're not vulnerable enough to sit and listen to the pain and the process and the story of individuals like Mark and Payton. And we need to learn from them. We need to sit with a notebook. We need to sit in the space of the student, but also be willing to ask the question. Also be willing to give the perspective of, well, this is what I heard, or this is what I thought, and allow time and space for individuals to inform our thinking, not by information, but by literal knowledge of who Mark is as a man, who Payton is as a man. And I want to encourage you, don't miss this opportunity. Let's not wait another 5 years till there has to be another tragedy that the whole world sees. Let's allow this to be the last time that we're silent, the last time that we sit and don't say anything. Let this be the opportunity that we step in and make a difference, even if just for our time. We can't steward what happened 4 years ago or 400 years ago or 4 years from now or 400 years from now. We can't steward that. We have to steward this moment in time and in space. This is what we will be held accountable for when we stand before God. So let's not miss this moment. So join me, join us as we continue on in this conversation of reconciliation. I love you. I'm so glad you joined us today. I ask you, let's do it. Let's make a difference. Let's start today, and let's see what we can do together. Thanks for joining.